say thank you very much for attending early on a Sunday. My name is Eric Andrews-Katz. I do interviews with the Seattle Gay News and with other sources. I've been doing interviews for about 9 years now. The two people on my right probably need no introduction, but I will go ahead and do it anyway. Dorothy Allison, originally from South Carolina. Her first book, Bastard Out of Carolina, won the Farrow Grumley Award and the Bay Area Reviewers Award. She has won the Lambda Literary Award several times, as well as being chosen as the Writer in Residence for Columbia College and the McGee Professor of Writing at Davidson College. A person at the Boston Globe said of Dorothy, quote, "Without question, Miss Allison is one of the finest writers of our generation." Miss Dorothy Allison. Sitting to her right is Mr. Jeff Mann. He is a recipient of the Pauline, I hope I pronounced this right, Rage Novel Award. Rayage.
It's fancy French.
All French is fancy.
He has also won the Lambda Literary Award, John Preston Short Fiction Award, the Dibble Press Poetry Prize. He grew up in Virginia, West Virginia, and now teaches creative writing at Virginia Tech. Welcome, Mr. Jeff Mann.
Just so you know, my current claim to fame is I am the Roy A. Cuff Writer in Residence at Austin P. University in Clarksville, Tennessee.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Roy A. Cuff.
Yeah, my friend Dick Falk says he wants to be the Jerry Lee Lewis writer. Yeah, I'm going for the Minnie Pearl. Right?
Yes.
I just love the South. Got to.
I don't think either of us have a problem with projection, but can everybody hear us okay? Okay, good. If there's any problem, just raise your hands and move your fingers and we'll speak a little louder for you guys.
Well, you've got a mic there. Fine.
Oh, good, that's
Or
true.
does it work?
That's true too. All right, we'll start with a question for both of you. Who were your earliest influences in becoming a writer? We'll start with Dorothy.
Wow, okay. Aside from the Reader's Digest anthologized collections, when you grow up poor and you grow up the child of a waitress and a truck driver, the books that you read, other than the terrible books they make you read at school, possibly you went to a good school, I grew up in South Carolina, you mostly read terrible books. So, and I did not know any, I didn't even have a concept that you could make a living as a writer. For the most part, I'm right.
That's true.
So the influences, but I think that the most powerful influence on me were those American Library paperbacks. Mostly I got them with the covers torn off because you get them at the resale bookstore and they were cheap. But I remember, without doubt, reading James Baldwin. And that, reading James Baldwin changed everything for me. It took me actually quite a while to find out that James Baldwin was gay. But it was just that he was writing about justice. And the world seemed to me such a place of injustice. And here was this reasoned, poetic, powerful voice that seemed to me was a welcoming voice, even though I was painfully aware that I was a white child and he was a black man. But that fact that you could write so clearly and strongly and still in a southern accent, I couldn't believe the child was from New York City. It's very complicated, this whole issue of race, class, and region. How about you, baby? What'd you think of?
Well, my father was the first person in his family to go to college. And after he went on the GI Bill after World War II. And otherwise, he couldn't afford it to go, I suspect. And so he actually had pretty good education by the time I came around. And he was big on me trying to get me to read classics. So I'd be buying the Avengers, you know, and Spider-Man and all that other stuff, and he'd slip in there used to be a comic book series based on classics.
Yeah.
Right? So he'd slip in Tale of Two Cities or something like that, which I didn't like quite as well as the X-Men, whatever. But So, I mean, I was really lucky to have him as a role model. Emotionally, it was a little more complicated. But intellectually, he brought me up to really like books. So by the time I got to high school, I mean, I was reading like the Iliad and the Odyssey. And I got a real taste for that Greek and Roman stuff, and that really helped when I realized at 16 that I was gay, because I ran across Mary Renaud, who was that South African novelist who had these amazing historical novels about ancient Greece with same-sex loving protagonists, without, you know, blinking an eye. So I was surreptitiously reading those historical novels by the time I was a senior in high school. But also had ended up reading a lot of Robert Frost. And now he was a Yankee, but he was writing about the countryside. He was writing about growing gardens and chopping wood and all that stuff that I was doing as a kid, thanks to my father, who had 2 children as sort of child labor to help him with the tree cutting and the gardens and all that. And then I guess my writerly ambitions, such as they were and are, really kicked in with college, because I went to West Virginia University because I had 2 lesbian friends who had helped me get through high school, and they were a year ahead of me, and they went to WVU. So by God, I was going to go to WVU. And I had a scholarship that was in-state, and they knew where the queer bars were. So I mean, I was set. By the time I realized I was gay, they were my friends. So man, it was easy for me, relatively speaking, late 70s. So I went to WVU, and my last year there, I ran across my secret girl, 2 of my secret girlfriends, not so secret, Sylvia Plath and Ann Sexton. And I said, shit, these women are writing about this intense, painful, brave, I mean, these topics were just so edgy. And I was so complicated and emotionally screwed and horny and depressed. And, you know, they really helped me to run across those women. I've been to both of their graves. In fact, Amy Evans there, that luscious creature with the long dark hair and the buxom dress, took me to the Ann Sexton grave in Jamaica Plain, Massachusetts, a couple years ago. So those were some of mine. And then, of course, I ran across Whitman. Yeah, I read a lot of Whitman in grad school and thought, hell, I mean, some of his poems are so incredibly queer for mid-1800s.
Or now.
Yes, or now, thank you. So there you go. I'm getting over a cold, so forgive me if I start to make unearthly noises.
Being a Southern writer has certain implications about the work and about the genre. What are the differences between being a writer from the South and being a quote-unquote Southern writer? And we'll start with Jeff on this one.
Well, I've known some Southerners that don't seem to be very Southern to me. I don't know whether it's class, or maybe they grew up in cities where the the folk culture is non-existent or diluted. And I would not think of those people as necessarily Southern writers if they don't write about the South. I mean, I'm a Southerner who is very Southern because I grew up in a small town, Southern West Virginia. I have the accent, I have a lot of those attitudes, mainly the good ones. Luckily, I managed to sidestep most of those nastiness. So I'm very proud of my ancestry, my heritage as a Southerner and an Appalachian, and I'm aware the way the rest of the world sometimes looks at us, and I have very deliberately, not assimilated, and have very deliberately written about Southern country people, mainly gay men and the occasional ferocious lesbian. It was lesbians who really saved my ass when men were breaking my heart. I had all these amazing women, including this poor woman here, with whom I was sharing a room, and my unearthly noises actually woke her up the other night, which I was concerned about. Luckily, NyQuil comes in pill form, so last night she's introduced me to that medication. So, I mean, I think a Southern writer, somebody in whose work the South, whatever that means, is a major theme, and it certainly is with my work. If any of that makes any sense.
He always makes sense, and he always talks as if he don't. might even be a qualifying for Southern writers, all things considered. It's a I don't know. I feel like I'm a sport, like I'm an alien child that was dropped on this planet, and somehow I landed in South Carolina, which is a good thing. Because I was raised among people who valued the outrageous and indignant. And most of my primary role models were my aunts, who were kind of take no prisoners bitches, which is a life-saving stance to be either a lesbian or a writer or a Southerner or a Southern writer. But this is the deal. When I began as a writer, it didn't occur to me that I was a Southern writer. I mean, regionally, that's where I was, but I was passionate about words, I was passionate about story, and most of all, I was passionate about people, particularly the people that I grew up among, and my family and my tribe, that seemed to me to be completely absent from all the books that I had access to. And then when I started reading Southern literature, I discovered that a lot of it was contemptuous of my people. You know, poor white trash does not do well. We don't do well. Let's just let it stand at that. And the portraits of us in most literature are frankly horrible. So that, you know, you read Erskine Caldwell and you might as well just cut your throat. And then I was this smart, strange, dykey kid. You know, like most of you. I understand there's some gender issues, but you know how they are. Most of you are writers, and most of you know that you grew up a sport and an object of contempt, of violence, and that you develop certain muscles. And if you're writing, the muscle you most want is power and authority on the page. And that was the primary thing. Then I discovered I was a Southern writer, which is a little bit tricky. But the thing that gets left out of that whole conversation is that within the definition of Southern writers, there's a rather broad range. And as soon as I went away to college on scholarship, I should just throw in here that I'm the first person in my enormous family to graduate from high school. And it really was the case that when I was young, my cousins would come look at me and think, that's Ruth's girl, she's smart. Which is just, yeah.
My in-laws are the same way.
And they began to believe that there was something about being a dyke that made you smart. Which I have to say is a good heritage that I have provided for the younger women in my family. You know, because one, you don't get pregnant, but we'll leave that over to the side. The issue is, when I went away to college on scholarship, and I suddenly discovered the world of Southern literature, I read Faulkner, and I wanted to kill somebody. Because the portrayals of my people in Faulkner are horrific. Oh my God, we're not only stupid, we're mean and violent and, you know, bent at the core and lacking souls. It was as if we were animals. And most of the portrayals in a lot of the Southern literature that I was reading was that portrayal of the working class as quasi-animals. Pretty much like the portrayal of black people in that same literature. So that was a little tricky. If I'm going to be a Southern writer and I was a proudly working class writer, my negotiation in that identification was a big problem. You have some of the same stuff going on.
Well, what saved my ass was Appalachian literature.
Well, yeah. Although let's be clear, there's a lot of contemptible and contemptuous Appalachian literature. Now, let's not leave it out. I mean, let's own our
Name 'em.
Our war.
Sorry.
But then you have to develop pride. Fortunately, if you're raised the way I was raised, that's not that hard. Our attitude toward the world is, back off, bitches.
Yes.
You know, that's a working class stance that I discovered was life-saving. Add on to that being a dyke. And you, like I said, take no prisoners, bitches. That actually, as an identifying factor as a Southern writer, gives you a lot of authority and freedom. They're not going to like us anyway, so fuck them. But this is the terrible thing. terrible thing is, I'm a snob, and it's kind of hard to say, but I love beautiful writing. I love language that sings on the page. So, you know, poorly crafted stories hurt my bones.
True wordsmith is rare.
Oh my God. And people, they would say, oh, you should love her. She's a, and I'm like, she can't write.
That's a problem.
And it's terrible. It's like, and I was raised a Baptist, which means they can't write, so you shouldn't tell them they can't write. They can't write. It's not like something they can fix. They're full of broken word bones. It's just not going to come together. There's a lot more complications to this category of Southern writer than are generally acknowledged, particularly if you're queer. And let's also be clear, you know, each and every one of you, you want to be the goddamn best writer in the room. We are competitive as fuck, and the only thing that saves us is a little bit of Christian shame. I'm sorry, but
Being a pagan, I don't even have that.
I'm a pagan. But, you know, once you get it, and it carries up, you know.
Yeah, but I was raised a Jew, so I don't even have that.
I have worshipped naked, leaping fires with 40 women in a field. Let me just say, Christian didn't come into it. Although we once did stage a crucifixion with rather remarkable results. You know, your sense of justice, your sense of meaning, your sense of purpose. I want a Southern literature that has as its primary shaping influence a desire for justice. And that to me means a truth on the page, write us warts and all, but show us with our large souls. No animals in this room, except for every occasion.
Dorothy, you've been quoted as crediting, quote, militant feminists for encouraging your decision to write.
Fuck yeah.
How did your writing first start?
Well, let's be clear about this too. I wrote, what is that quote from Bertha Harris? I wrote for the love of beautiful women. I wrote to seduce girls. Possibly you're better than me, but from my early teenage years, I wrote poems. I wrote adventure stories in which the adventure generally involved two girls running off up the highway, so that was my initial impulse, was to seduce. And then it gets complicated because I wanted to go to college and I wanted to be seen as fully human. So there was this act of seduction in which you write stories about your people, in which your people are noble. Well, we are sort of noble in the context of being poor, white trash, and nasty. It gets tricky. It gets very, very tricky. But you're asking about my immediate impulse. It's not. Whenever anybody just says they just had one contributing factor, I'm lost. Because, you know, maybe it's about trying to just stay alive, do meaningful work, but I've had so many different identities at different times. But most of all, I've been an aspiring writer, and that can get pretty fucked up. You want people to love and admire your work. Well, it's very hard to learn that there are people in the world who will not love and admire your work, no matter how good it is. And fuck them.
Yeah, there you go.
Jeff, throughout your writing, and especially early, you've made comments about having a love for Barnabas Jones. And, Barnabas Collins, I'm sorry, Barnabas Collins.
Talking Dark Shadows?
Dark Shadows, yes, sorry. So why do you think vampirism and homosexuality overlap so much in literature?
Well, he's very toothy, have you not noticed?
I'm very toothy. Yeah, well, I wrote an essay in my first collection called Watching Dark Shadows. We'll talk later about that lovely. He worked with one of those actresses, Mr. Cece there, who is stupendously attractive still and is writing wonderful novels. Her name's Laura Parker. She played Angelique.
Angelique.
Oh yeah, knockout, super smart woman.
High-waisted.
very lovely. And do not get on her bad side, because I've seen her wit used. It's terrifying. So, I mean, I was this high school, grade school kid. The first, that show ran from 66 to 71. And there's actually kind of a cliche among the Dark Shadows fans that we would run home from school to watch it, because it came on at 4 p.m. I think it was ABC. Well, I lived in rural West Virginia. We didn't get ABC. So I would I would take the bus home from school, and if my father wanted to go up to see my grandmother so we could work in the garden, I would demand to see the last 10 minutes of Dark Shadows before we went out to pull weeds and out of the carrots. Yeah, well, that essay I wrote is an attempt to kind of answer that question. And I used to teach a freshman comp class about the same issue just because it's so damn boring to teach freshman comp. I figured if I used the vampire literature and film that the students would be interested in, I would too, and it worked. Sex and violence, right? Get your attention. Well, I mean, the vampire's an outcast. There's the myth of vampirism being contagious. Cindy and I used to joke about the curse of lesbianism descending in some straight girl. There's been that joke about Anita Brown said they can't reproduce, so they must recruit. The vampire's a sensuous creature. It's driven by appetite. I certainly felt that way. I still do, but perhaps not quite so much as I did when I was in high school and college. The vampire is about the wild and the untrammeled, and the creature that society fears because it lets its appetites loose. I mean, these are all metaphors that I think lots of queer people can play with. And from the very beginning, before Dracula, vampirism was connected to lesbianism. I mean, I used to teach the class. Samuel Taylor Coleridge wrote this odd poem called Christabel, where there's a mysterious woman in the woods, and the little ingenue discovers her and helps her, and the fire flares up when she drags her over the threshold, suggestion being she couldn't enter on her own. And then there's this tempestuous night that, of course, is not very well described because it's Samuel Taylor Coleridge, it's probably a time ago. And then there was this guy named Sheridan Le Fanu from Ireland who wrote the infamous Carmilla, which is full-blown, so to speak. Lesbian attracts delicious stuff. So, I mean, the whole vampire homosexual thing has been around for a long damn time. And it continues to be. I mean, I have a vampire character I created. It's the first fiction I ever wrote. I was invited, a friend of mine was offered a deal to write a novella for a erotic vampire anthology. And he said, I got better things to do. I'm working on a novel. Would you do it? You're a Dark Shadows fan. I said, I don't like fiction. My husband, as we call them in the bear community, doesn't even look up from his laptop. You can do it. Some of the first damn fiction I ever wrote was a novella. And he's people will see if you respond the same way. He's a gay Appalachian vampire. Okay, so you don't laugh as uproariously as straight audiences. Right? The guy's still around. I wrote that in 2002, and his first full-length novel is coming out this fall. He takes on those motherfuckers mountaintop removal mining in Appalachia. Now, I assure you, because of all the kinky gay sex in the book, the Appalachian community will probably ignore this book. But you all rush out. If you hate people who ravish Appalachian landscapes and you like kinky gay sex, the book's for you.
Who doesn't like kinky gay sex?
And there's ferocious lesbians. So Cindy is one of the characters. She has a luscious black woman werewolfy, as I call them, girlfriend. It's a lot of fun. It was quite a vicarious pleasure to kill off all those co-operators.
Now you can see the generational distinction, because my memories of Dark Shadows, I was in college. I'm just a little bit older than you, child.
Just a little bit. Not much, though.
But we would come back from statistics classes, head for the lounge, snatch up our big bottles of, I think at the time I was drinking mimosas, which is, you know, a fancy way of saying orange juice and vodka. And we'd all, you know, we'd gulp in our mimosas and turn on Dark Shadows, and here they come. And we weren't all queer, but the majority of us were either queer or queer identified, which was a little tricky. This was 1977.
Yeah, 66, 71.
Yeah, 70, 71 was when the heyday of my Dark Shadows time. And we're like, we were making terrible, terrible jokes. Part of my skill and wit came on mimosas and Dark Shadows. And the fact that, what was that woman with the short hair that was always being dramatic, and she wasn't, Angelique was pretty. This was a semi-ugly woman.
In what? Oh, wow.
In Dark Shadows. She was a friend of Barnabas College. She was always protecting me. She was the doctor. And,
Julia Hoffman. Good
yeah,
God.
Julia
Lord,
Hoffman.
yes, she was.
And
the
she
Dr.
was
Julia
such a
Hoffman.
dyke. I mean, in the TV show they portrayed her as asexual, but that's how they portray us on TV back in 1971. So my first short story, one of the first short stories I ever wrote was Demon Lover.
Really?
Which was about not so much a vampire as a ghost, and it was about ghost sex. Go read it.
So between these mimosas and Dark Shadows, when did you try smoking rabbit weed, running in place, and putting your head between speakers to get high?
All the time. You'd be amazed. I mean, a lot of getting high is self-induced, and let me just say, running in place while smoking rabbit weed, you'll get dizzy, I assure you. You won't get high on rabbit weed. It was just, you know, that was that kind of stinky grass. It wasn't really good grass, which does its true stink, but it's not the same. But running in place, yeah, you get low blood sugar, dizzy. Next thing you know, you fall on it. Oh, I'm sorry.
I tripped and beat you to the floor.
My notion of Southern literature was that I was going to write realistically about a working class perverse childhood, and pretty much that's what I did. That's where that all that came from.
In '92, the KK Roeder from the San Francisco Review of Books said, quote, Allison relates the difficulty of Bones' struggle with intensity, humor, and hard-wrought rejection of self-pity, rendering A Bastard Out of Carolina rare achievement among works of fiction. George Garrett from the New York Times Book Review called it, quote, close to flawless, and has compared it to A Catcher in the Rye and To Kill a Mockingbird. What gave you the strength to write such a mostly autobiographical book?
Yeah, it's a novel. I mean, it's full of lies, like all good novels. It is based somewhat in my life and experience. What gave me I've said this before, I am what you get if you cross-reference, you know, baby dyke, feminism, and outrageousness. I'm what you get. It would not have happened but I became myself in the women's movement. Up until the women's movement, I was on a short road to suicide. Possibly you don't know this, but you know, you fuck a child and you make a broken creature. And I got fucked early and hard. But the point at which I got angry enough not to be immediately suicidal, there's so many ways to kill yourself between the ages of 12 and 20. You know this. I guarantee you there are people in this room who've sat with a razor. It's the nature of, some of it is growing up queer. You grow up with sexual abuse, you grow up with violence, it gets multi-layered, multi-textured. I was working hard on suicide, but I was a coward, so that my attempts at suicide were putting myself in the way of fast cars and faster women. Women will kill you, especially if you get the good ones. And that's what was happening to me. That's what I was doing. And I went up to Tallahassee, Florida. I went to Tallahassee, Florida, took a job with the Social Security Administration, in part not to kill myself in my mother's house. I was still going to kill myself in some creative fashion, but I didn't want to do it in my mother's house. Her life was hard enough. And my notion was I'd disappear into some swamp, which we got lots of in North Florida. But instead, I walked into the women's building, the women's center, and everything changed. There was a consciousness raising meeting. I know what the fuck but they were all sitting in a circle and they were passing a shell around. These bitches are crazy. But you know, I was raised in church, I can testify. And one of the women in the room, and I've said it many times, a woman so different from me, my immediate contempt for her was visceral. She was well dressed, she was wearing heels and pearls. And, you know, I was in blue jeans and boots. Attitude. But she started off by saying, I need your help. Every night I dream of it. Every night I dream of it. I'm going to go and kill him. And I knew immediately what she was talking about. And so then we discussed how badly we wanted to kill our fathers, stepfathers, brothers, and cousins. I had never been in the presence. I mean, I've been to church. I've heard testimony. But nobody had ever said, he's fucking me. You couldn't say that and live. You couldn't. And she did. And it was like, it took me weeks to say, he fucked me. And put it that way. Because I needed it to be explicit. I needed to say, fuck.
You can't clean up something
I
as
didn't want
dirty
to
as
clean
that.
it up. I didn't want to clean it up at all. And I had fallen into a hotbed of lesbianism and feminism, and we were going to take down this nation and remake it. And I immediately became drunk on the prospect. And that immediately gave me a community and an audience and other women who were telling their stories and other women who were trying to write with authority, with power, with brutal honesty, and every once in a while with a little grace and language. You know, that's how I began as a writer. And I think that if I had not walked into that room at that moment, I wouldn't have lasted very long. And let's be clear, it's not like I was baptized in fire and saved. I still kept trying to kill myself for years. This stuff is thick and takes time. But writing gave me a ladder. Writing gave me a way out. Not to completely despair. And that in a sense of humor.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. 1996, Angelica Houston directed a film version of Bastard Out of Carolina. The film starred Diana Scarwood, Jennifer Jason Leigh, Dermot Mulroney, Christina Ricci, and Jenna Malone as Bone. Wonderful film. Were you connected to the film version in any way, and were you happy with the results of it?
Well, now that's a complicated. It could have been so much worse. That's always been it could have been white panties and I'd had to kill somebody. Never forget also that it makes me related to a great blues singer. It'll come to me later. I'm having one of those senior moments. Diminished capacity syndrome is me. But Angelica, she loved the book. She wept on my shoulder. You know, she was like, oh, and I'm like, bitch is beautiful and rich, and she's creaming my sleeve. So it was like, I'm in a different reality. I didn't belong in Hollywood, and they don't like writers anyway. They just want to take the title and an outline of the book and go do what they do, and I had been warned about that, but she paid me money. Let's never forget that you sell movie rights for the cash. And it was made plain to me, it was Barbara Kingsolver who told me, sell the movie rights, because if you do not, they'll make Bastard Out of California and you won't see a dime. Sell the movie rights, buy time to write your next book. So I'm like, okay. And she said, and you might get a little influence on how it's done, although not really. And this is true, you don't really have any power. Writers don't when you deal with movie people and media people. But she meant well. So there's a whole lot of she meant well. Problem is, she did actually have, Angelica Houston had an enormous insight into violence and family violence, so that the violence in the movie is visceral and beautifully done, and I can't watch it, but I'm a little sensitive to some things. She did a beautiful job. The problem is, the bitch doesn't have any sense of humor. And the design of the novel is that it is constantly shifting from a kind of poetic and somewhat grim depiction of a horrible situation to scenes of life-saving humor. This family survives by wit and laughing at what it cannot be funny. No, you could weep or you could laugh, and they choose to laugh. So that it's, I always would go out to read from the book, and people would say, "You're funny." I said, "Yeah." How do you think we're still alive? If you don't develop a sense of humor by 8 in my family, we drown you. You haven't got a chance in hell of making it through adolescence. The book is designed deliberately that way, and Angelica Houston didn't get it, so it's pretty unrelieved in my opinion. I can't watch it. But she meant well, and the sepia tone pictures look nice.
Jeff,
Not good.
Jeff,
Have you
in
had
your
a movie
book,
made?
No.
Damn!
I know those Civil War novels just aching to be
I
finished.
mean, I know. It'd be so pretty. You could get some nice. Never mind.
My publisher asked me who I would want to have play me, and I said, in what, I don't know, whatever movie, and I said, oh, well, Gerard Butler. And I could coach him on Appalachian accents.
And you could help him out by shaving his head. That'd be fun.
Jeff, in your book,
Sorry.
Travels of an Appalachian Leather Bear, you travel throughout several countries in Europe, and you encounter several statues and paintings and figures of Christ, as one happens to do in Europe. At the Church of St. Nicholas in Brussels, Belgium, you encounter the statue of Christ, the Ecce Homo. What was it about that particular statue that impressed you? And is it the figure, the artwork, or the legend that seems to be a reoccurring theme with your work?
Or the title.
I have no idea. Because I wrote that book in 2002, and I haven't really read it since.
Here you go.
It was reprinted. You know what page that is? Okay.
It's in the first couple.
Well, okay, I can talk to you about, yeah, so it was reprinted in that's the 2008 Lethe Press, God bless them. Steve Berman estate, I asked for complete obscurity. He's the publisher of Lethe Press. He's published almost everything that I have published since, well, I met him. This festival has completely saved my ass. I will just say, those of you new to this place, you need to keep coming back here, because I don't know what I would do without this event. I would be even more out howling in the wilderness than I feel.
But you do it so well.
Whoa, well, better when I don't have so much crap in the back of my throat. I tried to make one of my strange animal noises for Cindy, and it just kind of came out as a squeak. It's very disappointing. So I don't remember that particular statue, but so I'm a big old pagan too. I've got, let's see, this is how many Thor's hammers do I have on my body? So Christianity, I have a very problematic relationship with Christianity. A friend of mine, lesbian, that I grew up with in Hinton, West Virginia, my little hometown, used to say that growing up in Hinton was enough to turn you communist, atheist, and queer. Well, I'm not a communist, I'm a pagan instead of an atheist, and I'm definitely queer. But so I understand what she was saying. I grew up around a kind of fundamentalist Christianity that I just have a passionate detestation for. I hate those people because they hate me. And of course we're seeing them having a very fun time at this point in American history. But I'm a leather bear, as in BDSM is really my eros. And you get a good looking man with long hair and a beard and nothing but a loincloth, and you slap him up on a cross. I would much prefer rope than nails. But it's just erotic imagery. One, it's erotic like BDS imagery. These images of Christ that I ran across all over Europe. I don't like those Byzantine Christs because I like a man with a little meat on him. And those Byzantine Christs are too goddamn scrawny. But also a little more, a little bit more profound than just that kind of simple sadistic lust is that I've read a lot about paganism and the ways in which Christianity has co-opted elements of paganism. And for me, Virgin Mary, the first mother of heaven was Isis, and those motherfuckers who use that term to refer to their bad behavior, I find that very offensive as a pagan, because Isis was a great goddess in Egyptian mythology. Virgin Mary is just one of those mother goddesses, and Christ is one of those sacrifice gods who represents vegetation, who dies in the fall and is resurrected in the spring. So
there are many of those.
Yes, So for me, that image of Christ on the cross is one, erotic, because I'm a sadist, and two, it taps into that long history, way before Christianity, of male sacrifice gods. No, I don't remember that particular step.
Erastus, the author of Mere Mortals, says, quote, from the first page, purgatory grabs you by the heart and won't let go. Publishers Weekly says, quote, Mann effectively weaves into his narrative the hunger, lice, and hardening of men who lived throughout the war. And the GLBT review says, libraries that collect gay historical fiction, Civil War novels, and LGBT fiction will want these books, Purgatory and Salvation, part of their library, as well as Mann's other works. What was the most surprising factor you came across when researching homosexuality in the Civil War?
Well, there's so little on that particular topic. And I mean, I've read so many books about the Civil War before I wrote those novels. And I wasn't entirely surprised at the paucity of the material, because, so if there was some Civil War soldier who has in his journals or letters something about a same-sex affair, and then the guy gets to be a poor old bastard of a veteran and then expires, his relatives get his effects. Now, I assure you that those relatives are not going to say, oh, you know, Uncle so-and-so was in love with Sergeant so-and-so. Well, let's just take this to the Historical Society. You know, ain't going to happen. So I'm not at all surprised that there's not a lot of evidence about that. Now, what I think the thing that struck me the most about that research, I mean, I was never someone, well, hell, maybe when I was 16, but I don't remember that person. As a thinking adult, I've never been somebody who glorifies or romanticizes war. But to read those books, especially personal, you know, letters and diaries, the monumental suffering for everybody, the slaves, the Union soldiers, the Confederate soldiers, the Union, well, the Southern civilians suffered like fucking hell, which is something people don't want to talk about too much more. The Union civilians suffered in that there were all these empty tables at the dining room, and there were songs about the empty chair, that sort of thing. The suffering was just stunning. You go into those museums and look at those doctors' kits, Jesus, the bone saws. So when I think about the Civil War, and when I write about the Civil War, I think about all that suffering and how everybody was part of that. So, I mean, that was the thing that really struck me. I mean, my father's mother's maternal grandfather was a Confederate soldier, so he's buried in our family cemetery. And I would look at that marker and think, Jesus, man, what did you? Well, he survived, and his two brothers, but there's a lot of boys that didn't. And I go to those graveyards. Some of them are mass graves. God, the sorrow. You know. Yeah. So,
But you wrote a love story.
yes, I did. I did. I wrote about a Confederate soldier who falls in love with a Yankee prisoner of war. And I was determined to give them a happy ending. I knew that before I started this book. So, yeah, that was quite a journey. People want me to write a third one, but I'm not going to do it. Sorry.
No, sorry. Dorothy, New York Times Book Review says of the book Trash, the collection of essays, simply stunning. The San Francisco Chronicle says compulsively readable. According to the research, you were inspired to write Trash because Mab Segrest's collection of essays, My Mama's Dead Squirrel, got a review that infuriated you. What was the comment? What pissed you off? And how did this collection start?
Don't fuck with us or we'll wax you a collection. young, I was writing a lot, and Nancy Bariano was running Firebrand Books, and she kept wanting me to do a book of short stories. She had heard me read stories. I read, I like to read my stuff out loud. You might occasionally have a chance to hear me. And she wanted a collection, but I was so busy, I was saving the world for lesbians, and that was kind of engrossing. So I didn't have a collection. But then the Women's Review of Books came out. Now I love Mann Segrist. Mann is an anti-Klan organizer. Lived in North Carolina, did anti-Klan work for 30 fucking years. Her phone number and address is always on the Klan hotline. They've been hunting her down. She survived because her neighbors adore her, and they like have protective groups that walk the neighborhood at night to keep somebody from shooting her in the head. I love Mann Segrist with my whole heart. And she wrote My Mama's Dead Squirrel, which is an essay book about Southern humor, about writing with humor, our perverse sense of humor. You know, we all got it. Well, she wrote brilliantly about it. It got this review in the Women's Review of Books, done by Julia Penelope. May she rot in hell. And she wrote this completely nasty review. Now, nasty reviews come in all different kinds. But the bone she picked was that how trivial, silly, and useless was this book on Southern humor. And it was just mean. It was the mean. I mean, I was reading it. By the time I got to the third paragraph, I was frothing. And by the time I finished it, I was dialing Nancy Bariano's number, and I said, "We're gonna do a book. We're gonna do a book that's gonna make Julia Penelope's teeth fall out." But, you know, the impulse to making a book and the follow-through on making a book are different, because writing is long, and you know it takes a little time to craft stories, and in the crafting of stories, Julia Penelope is a cockroach running across the floor. She don't mean shit. The writing the story becomes so much more important, and the purpose of putting together a collection of stories becomes so much more important. By the time I finished Trash, it had very little damn to do, although I do think it probably gave her indigestion. Pretty sure. But she never reviewed it, because possibly she was a little nervous. Might as well have been. But that was the impulse. I would never, I don't believe I would have finished a collection and published it if I hadn't lost my temper. And then Nancy was like, "How's the book coming? How's the book coming?" You need a publisher who will keep saying, "How's the book coming?" God save us if they get afraid of you. You're fucked.
It is my distinctive honor now to present a reading by Dorothy Allison from her collection Skin, Her Body, Mine, and His.
Oh, fuck, I forgot to bring it.
Okay, we'll present something else by Dorothy Allison in just a few moments. And we'll just...
Trash.
There you go. I also have that one as well if you'd like.
Yeah, well. No, let's be really ruthless.
Improvisation.
We know. No, this is what I tell baby writers. Life is a pop quiz.
Yes, I love this.
You just got to be ready, because life is a fucking pop quiz. I have to stand up. I don't stand up that good right now. I fucked up my knee. Not playing baseball. Or basketball, or any of them butch sports. I'm not butch. Raise me an appetite. Biscuits. I dream about baking biscuits. Sifting flour, baking powder, and salt together, measuring out shortening and buttermilk by eye, rolling it all out with flour-dusted fingers. Beans. God, I dream about picking over beans, soaking them overnight, chopping pork fat, slicing onions, putting it all in a great iron pot to bubble for hour after hour, until all the world smells of salt and heat. Sweat that used to pool on my mama's neck. And greens. Mustard greens, collards, turnip greens, poke. You cannot find this stuff in the shops up north. In the middle of the night, I wake up in the New York City, wake up desperate for the taste of greens, get up, go find me a 24-hour deli, has a can of spinach and half a pound of bacon. I fry the bacon, I dump in the spinach, I bring it all into a boil, I eat it with tears in my eyes. It don't taste like nothing I really wanted to have. And when I find collard greens in the Safeway grocery, I buy 5 bags. I store them in the freezer. That means if I wake up desperate in the night, there will be something I will want to cook. There will be something I will want to share.
I just told her she made me so hungry. So that's exactly the kind of food I grew up on.
Red beans and rice. We in the town of red beans and rice.
But she said, "Well, you're in New Orleans, you'll manage being hungry." Oh God, yeah. That's the kind of food I make for my friends.
And it's sex.
The Southern food and writing comes hand in hand. It's just
Well,
part of life.
That's what the whole piece is about. Lesbian appetite is moving back and forth from food to sex to food to sex and fun. Yes.
I actually have an essay called Leather Bear Appetites, and I just realized that I stole the title from you. So.
I'll give you license.
Thank you.
It is now my distinctive pleasure also to present Mr. Jeff Mann, who will be reading Trounced by Princess Puppy on the difficulties of being a gay writer in Appalachia.
Beware of the fabulous beast that is Princess Puppy. So I woke up at 4 in the morning and thought, shit, he told me he wanted me to read something. What did I tell him I was going to read? And I had NyQuil in my system, but I finally figured out it was Princess Puppy. So this is from, so some of you know Jameson Courier, who runs Chelsea Station Books and Magazine, and he published this online in Chelsea Station Magazine, so I much appreciate that. I hope that some of you relate to this. As a writer whose work most often focuses on both the gay male and the Appalachian experience, I get an unspoken message from many sources that my literary labors do not in the long run count. From mainstream editors, publishers, and reviewers. From certain colleagues at Virginia Tech. From urban LGBT folks who regard rustic or regional identity with patronizing contempt. From Appalachian folks who regard gays with pious fear and loathing. Even from certain MFA students, little bastards, many of whom are fascinated with the urbane and the faddish and have no respect for or interest in artists who speak for subcultures and minorities. To be both queer and regional, these sources tacitly insist, is to be doubly limited in scope, twice as dismissible. LGBT is not universal, Appalachian is not universal. Who, in other words, wants to read about hillbillies and queers? In order to achieve a more respectable literary reputation, perhaps I should write distanced, obscure lyrics and witty postmodern narratives about heterosexual life in the DC suburbs. But I fear that might require more research than my impatience would permit. Sorry, nasty shit. What's shitty time? Hateful virus. So I'm going to skip a little bit of just specific whining about being a virulent bastard here. I'm not alone in these frustrations, of course. So many of us writers, straight or gay, urban or country, have faced the same tsunamis of indifference and trudged through the same sloughs of self-doubt. We've continued writing as best we can in the face of neglect, obscurity, and the dwindling possibilities of publishing in a world where fewer and fewer people seem to read with any regularity. The seductions of text messaging, television, and computer games apparently being too powerful to resist. Stubbornness gets us through. Sheer orneriness and the inescapable urge to express what we must. Humor also rescues us. When I want to make laughter out of how unwelcome and invisible I, as a gay author in Appalachia, sometimes feel, like that evil fairy not invited to Snow White's christening, I tell the tale of Princess Puppy. Prepare yourselves. A straight friend of mine, Tiffany Trent, author of several popular young adult fantasy novels, was invited to be part of the second annual author fair at the Pulaski County Public Library in the very same Virginia town where my husband and I live. Tiffany encouraged the organizer of the event to invite me, since I've published a goodly number of books and live only a few blocks from the library. The invitation came, you know where this is going. The invitation came via email asking for a description of what I published. Yeah, and a list of my book titles. I responded honestly and in some detail. I received no reply. When, a few days before the event, I emailed the organizer again, she replied by withdrawing the invitation, telling me that the event had too many authors as it was. Well, as you'll discover, I was lucky. Pulaski is, like many small mountain towns, infested with fundamentalist Christians. Was this a case of homophobia? I don't know. I try not to assume the worst, despite my tendency towards paranoia. I do know, thanks to Tiffany's breathless report afterward, that almost all the authors who were celebrated that afternoon were self-published. Tiffany and a poet from Radford University were the only exceptions. Here comes the puppy. The most colorful presence at the author fair was a woman whose makeup rivaled Tammy Faye Baker's. She chided Tiffany for writing young adult dark fantasy. Oh dear, she said, why can't people stop writing that nonsense and just write wholesome books with good Christian values like mine? You aren't saved, are you? Her wholesome Christian books, it turned out, were a series of children's books about Princess Puppy. Best of all, said Princess was actually present at the library event. As Tiffany describes it, a poodle lunged from a cavern of pink tulle piled under a book table. It wore a tutu and tiara, and yet so vociferously that the tiara slid down over its face. Tiffany was later to note, upon closer examination, that the princess was a prince. Yes, here was a Christian author who turned her dogs into ballet drag queens. I'm almost done. Tiffany spent the remainder of the event being annoyed by the poodle's manic yapping and listening to a clutch of other authors talk about the importance of letting Jesus into one's life. She was, however, allowed some pleasure as she was packing to leave. Without warning, the puppy drag princess lifted his leg and pissed all over his pink tulle bed. Ever since I heard Tiffany's tales of this prissy canine, I've been joking that I need a t-shirt with the slogan, "Trounced by Princess Puppy." Part of being marginalized is being excluded from literary journals, networking opportunities, chances for recognition and publicity, but sometimes being excluded is a blessing. It spares you many an irritation. If I'm invited to participate in next year's Pulaski Author Fair, I think I'll pass.
Thank you both. I have one more question and then I will turn you over to your audience. If you had to pick one piece of your work to represent you in a time capsule, what would it be and why?
I'd put in Bastard out of Carolina, probably in the audio version.
Who does the audio version?
Me. You think I'm gonna let it to somebody else? No.
Probably Loving Mountains, Loving Man. It's actually the only book I published according to the Appalachian Literature World, and that was published in 2005. It was published by University Press, and academics are impressed by that and not impressed by, yeah. But, I mean, it was the first book, I think, that was about being a gay guy, dealing with gay and balancing gay and Appalachian identity. You know, Ohio University Press. So,
Lovely.
thank you. And it's got pictures of me with hair. They asked for pictures, and these black and white pictures in the middle. Cindy's in that one too. And there's this picture of this poor child lifting weights, scrawny little shoulders, and this patchy beard, and all this black hair falling down over his. I thought, who was that child? That was me about 1978.
I present you to your audience. Any questions from the audience for these two wonderful writers? Yes?
I'm going back to the very beginning when you said you, for both of you really, but Dorothy, you said you didn't realize you were a Southern writer. And I feel often, I'm from West Virginia, hi Jeff, that I often get caught up in having to represent the region in a certain way now because it's become expected, and I lose sight of the characters. Any advice on how to deal with that, or have you come into that and bumped into that in your own writing?
Oh, I bumped into it repeatedly. Fell over it and tripped and really got in trouble. I think one of my issues with the label of Southern writing, though, is that a lot of what I was being encouraged to write was what I think of as a very, going around this, trivial writing, which is a poor excuse for humor writing. You know what I'm talking about? You go to the airport and you see all these books about Southern humorous books, and they're tawdry and they're pitiful. They're just pitiful and poorly written, not even that funny. And they make fun of Southerners, particularly poor working class and black Southerners. And I was highly offended. And I feel like my entire writing life I've been writing in resistance to that category. And when I teach writing, particularly working with baby writers in the South, I'm like, this is the gully that you can fall into, because Yankees, non-Southerners, do think that we are objects of humor, we're objects of fun, but it is a contemptuous, trivializing humor that has nothing to do with what I think of as the life-saving humor inherent in most Southern fiction, most Southern narrative. I mean, you listen to his essay, we got a nasty street. But I never wanted to write those books of, recipes that'll kill you. Just, you've seen these books, you know what I'm talking about. But that is what is expected, and that is, to a large extent, what is celebrated in giving prizes and sells in large numbers. So, if you want to make a living, you could either write mysteries or you could write not funny books in a Southern accent. No, that's not what I want to do. You have to realize, you have to take yourself seriously. And I think we're not taken seriously, either as queers or as Southerners, and it's complicated. You have to be in resistance to that impulse pushing you to write that kind of shit. Do that make sense?
Yeah.
In your book, 2 or 3 things I know for sure that I use as a textbook in my creative nonfiction class. I mean, you say, if you're a member of a marginalized group and you don't tell your story, I assure you other people will.
Yeah, boy. You will not recognize yourself.
Yeah. So I mean, that becomes this almost moral duty.
Teach you something to aim at, like it's in a shotgun.
Yes.
Other questions?
You guys are cute as the day. Older I get, the prettier you look. I can't do much anymore, but I think it all.
Testify.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Fun getting to know you.
You keep it season. Take care of those ferocious game
I will, I sure will. Yeah, oh my God. Exactly. And you were like, at that moment, you were like,
Could be dead, yeah, but
You guys ready? All right. Maybe get another one. Okay. All right, I think that should do it.
Thank you very much. The video should be I put on my sure. Put this one on YouTube.
I'll see you at John City. I'll be at that panel that she's moderating here on.
I always get there. That is turned off, right? Nope.